Right. Now, Mr. Golub, you follow American politics very closely. So help us understand here, irrespective of who the Americans vote for, whether it's the Democrats or the Republican presidents, the fact is they all end up going on these foreign wars. And just to give some interesting numbers, for the Afghan war, the war that the Americans fought for 20 years in Afghanistan, according to Brown University, the American state ended up spending about $2.3 trillion. In the Iraq war, the Americans ended up spending about $3 trillion. In your estimate, this war that Donald Trump has started in Iran, which is again proving to be very costly, is this looking like another forever foreign war that Trump seems to have sleepwalked into?
Sleepwalk might be a good term, in that this is a man who's very ignorant as well as arrogant when it comes to knowledge of the issues he's dealing with in all sorts of ways, including one of the most important issues a president can deal with, going to war. In terms of that data you quoted from Brown University, which I'm proud to be an alumnus of, that those are massive sums that were invested by the U.S. in those countries, ultimately completely unsuccessfully in Afghanistan, given that the Taliban came back, and to a good extent unsuccessfully in Iraq as well. I don't think this will be a forever war for a couple of reasons. One is that it won't last nearly as long. For one thing, Donald Trump, I don't think, has the attention span or the patience for that. He realizes that getting involved in a forever war could hurt him even more politically than a short-term engagement could. He's very concerned with the stock market, and right. The longer this war goes on, the more that could hurt the stock market and the economy and his political standing. That's not to say he won't sleepwalk or stumble into a longer engagement that could go on for months and months, but I'm not seeing this as something that will go on for years and years. The one caveat to all this is you've got a guy who has, personality problems, may be exhibiting the starts of dementia in terms of how he's interacting with the world. And on top of that is advised by a group of advisors who are much less competent than the people who, rightly or wrongly, in terms of the policies pursued, were the guides, were the people who worked with previous presidents, be they Democratic or Republican.
It's interesting that you brought up the question of the advisors for Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, just recently, a couple of days back, said that the reason that he has gone into this war is on the basis of the advice that was given to him by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Now, these two gentlemen who are advising the Trump happen to be real estate developers. Their military credentials actually are not very well known. Now, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, according to reports that came out in the American media, had indicated to Donald Trump that if he were to go into this war against Iran, there will be some serious risks that the American military will have to face. In your assessment, the fact that Donald Trump is relying for advice on the question of going to war on Iran on real estate developers like Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, how concerned are you as an American citizen?
Extremely concerned, and I almost feel like I should apologize for smiling while we're discussing such a serious topic. But yes, to have his real estate pal and his son-in-law being two of his top advisors, and in fact being the two lead negotiators with Iran and on a number of other issues, is something that, if it weren't, you could laugh until you cry in thinking about that possibility. The incompetence and lack of experience and expertise goes beyond them, though, in terms of, as I mentioned, the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, whose main claim to fame previously was, a kind of allegiance or loyalty to Syria's dictator and to Russia's dictator, Putin. So it's a clown car in many ways in terms of many of the top people who are advising him. And that means, and on top of all of that, one thing that Trump has been doing over the past year of his administration has been decimating the ranks of the experts in the CIA, in the Department of Defense, in the Department of Justice, in the FBI, who know about Iran, who know about counterterrorism, who know about important related fields, the National Security Council, all of those very important bodies. These are the people who could really inform the decisions of top decision makers. Yet he's scrapped a lot of them, fired a lot of them for all sorts of really ridiculous and counterproductive reasons.
Right. Now, Mujtaba Khamenei and also Masoud Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, they've both said that one of the conditions that will have to be met before the Iranians would even think of negotiating with the Americans again is that the American military bases in the Middle East will have to go. A lot of the GCC nations are also perhaps saying this in whispers, that the American military bases, instead of providing security to them, have been the reason as to why they've come under attack. In your assessment, what do you think will happen to these military bases?
Oh, to be frank, I don't know. So much needs to play out in so many ways, on so many levels yet. Even after these Iranian attacks on these Gulf nations, which house these U.S. military bases, those nations may yet decide we're better off with them staying there, the bases staying there, after the conflict ends, whenever that ends. It may be sowing seeds of doubt in the sultans and the other rulers of these countries, but still they may decide, even with all this damage, we're better off with the U.S. staying there. However, let's see how it plays out. Even though the U.S. even though the U.S. has imposed incredible damage and in some ways could be considering it itself successful, Trump is making claims along those lines. In a similar way that the U.S. may fall short of its goals, it could be that Iran yet may short of fall of its own goals in this conflict, including the very goal you just mentioned of forcing the U.S. to pull out of the region.
All right, my final question to you is this. Now, Donald Trump, when he talks about this war, he seems to indicate that he can control when this war can end. He's said this to some of the American media outlets that he has interacted with, where he said that this war is going to end pretty soon. Donald Trump started this war, but do you think he has any control on when this war can come to an end?
He has some control, but Iran has a say also. Unless miraculously there's a democratic revolution that puts in a reformist government, or at least a much more amenable government in Iran, which right now is looking very unlikely, there's no guarantee that even if Donald Trump does what I mentioned earlier, declaring victory and pulling out, that Iran will agree with that Iran will agree to the cessation of hostilities. And in addition, you've got this factor of Israel. And what will Israel do? It could be that if Trump says to Israel, you have to stop now as well, Israel may well do that, given how much influence, financial, military supplies and the like, the U.S. provides Israel. But there's no absolute guarantee of even that. If I may mention one other factor that I think affects India. Okay, more specifically, who knows what China will do in reaction to what the U.S. is doing, the drawdown of U.S. forces, the loss of U.S. prestige. Who knows what China may decide to do regarding its longstanding goal of taking over Taiwan. I'm not saying that will happen, but that's something you have to wonder about.
That would be seen by the Chinese as a God-sent opportunity on what they intend to do with Taiwan. We're completely out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Stephen Golub, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.